Hi, everybody. By now, you know I'm Terry Brown, and this is All Bass No Bull. And I think that maybe today's guest will get to tell you just how glamorous the life of a pro bass fisherman is, and you know what he just goofing around in the off season and really doesn't do anything. With me today is Billy Lowen, and Bill, it's a cakewalk, isn't it? When you're off in the off season, you don't do anything, just sit around the house, put your feet up in a chair, watch football. Nothing going on really much, is there?
Yeah, I wish that was the case, but it most definitely is not. So yeah, even though it's off season, it's not actually off season.
Yeah, actually, it's probably on season because you're working with sponsors, you're working with manufacturers, you're working with trying to get things geared up for the following year, and you know it's kind of funny because I tried getting you on here a couple weeks ago, and you said, "Well, I got to hold off a little bit," and I thought, "Oh man, he's sick or something, I'm going to have surgery, something like that." And no, I'm going to China. So I know you went to China, you went with ARC, and that has to be a cool experience. I mean, really neat experience. Tell me a little bit about it, if you would.
It was an awesome experience for sure. So glad I got the opportunity to do that. Um, there was a couple things. Getting there. Obviously, it's a 15 to 17 hour plane ride. Didn't know what to expect. Had never been out of the country before. Had never. I've had a passport forever, but had never used it. Um, like I said, didn't know what to expect. We flew into Shanghai, and um, first thing I noticed was the population of people. There's so many more people in China than there is here in the states. But overall, all of my worries that I had, about food and different things and things like that, um, everything turned out to be absolutely amazing. Like I said in one of my posts I put up, if you ever get the opportunity to go to China, I would try to take full advantage of it just because of the things you get to experience, the culture. We went with arc rods, but we also got to go to the Great Wall of China, the Imperial Palace, in Beijing there where they had the Olympics a few years back. We got to go there. So to be able to see all that was really cool. But what was probably the coolest thing to me was that I didn't realize that bass fishing was becoming so popular in China. And I believe over the last 5 or 6 years, it has really exploded and become very popular. So we kind of the guys from Arc took us over there. I'm just going to call it a fishing tour, basically. We got to go over there. We got to fish. We got to meet the fans. And once again, it was just, I had no idea that it was as popular as it was, and how, I guess, popular that we were as the anglers being over there. Myself, Randall Tharp, and Brandon Cobb were all there for ARC. So, like I said, it was just really an eye opener for me that um, here we are all the way on the other side of the world, talking about bass fishing, teaching bass fishing, because what was really cool was they're all about finesse over there. There's so much fishing pressure. They're all about 4 pound line and 2 inch Cincos and things like that. And I mean, me, Terry, I showed up with a 7.6 swim jig rod, 20 pound, 22 pound Tatsu fluorocarbon because I didn't have any braid with me, a high speed arc reel, my signature series swim jig, my quarter ounce from Lure Parts Online, and a Z Crawl Junior in white. And literally caught them and caught them and caught them every lake we went to. It was like they'd never seen it, which they probably hadn't. Um, but what was really cool was to have, one of the lakes we went to, and it's really hard to bass fish in China. It's not like you can just walk down to the lake and go fishing. A lot of the bass have to be brought in, they have to be stocked. So one of the lakes we went to was a place where you could pay to fish from the shore, right? Like $30 a day or whatever that may be. Or you could rent a boat with a trolling motor on it for like $90 a day. And it had little places like, I'm just going to call them hotel rooms that you could stay in, which is what we actually stayed in. But people would come there and fish from the shore, um, and just catch bass. And a big bass to me, what I'm seeing after being there in China would be about a 3 pounder. Um, and we caught a lot of those 2 to 2.5 pound, pound and 3/4 size fish. But what I was getting at was I had people following me on the shore, watching me fish a swim jig, because it's no secret. If I was known for any technique, that's probably what it is. But to have anglers that have kind of followed you, um, and be able to follow you on the shore and watch you fish like that. I actually had one of the China anglers tell me that my swim jig technique was beautiful. You know what I mean? I've never had anybody tell me that. You know what I mean? So for myself to be able to experience that and for them to be able to experience it, it was well worth it. So, like I said, it was an amazing trip across the board. We got to go to the factories where arc rods and reels are built, and a lot of um, other brands as well. But it was cool to see the manufacturing side of the process, and things like that. Where a lot of our fishing equipment comes from.
Well, it's funny. I've got a couple of contacts over in China, and then that I talk to pretty regular. And I'm wearing this Express Boats thing, which are very, very vital and part of their marketing programs. But we actually shipped, and I was involved in this. We shipped, I think, 3 or 6 Express Boats over there, and they bought them, they purchased them, they sold them, they did what they do with them. And there's another boat company over there I'm really intrigued by. It's called Kimball, and their boats are really unique. They're like the boats that we have around here. Billy, when we fish the smaller lakes around here, we've got boats that we basically make for those smaller lakes. Their boats are like that a lot, and they're starting to get into the bass boat business a lot. But Express kind of has. They probably won't take credit for this, but they probably had as much to do with how their boats are being developed as anybody did. And you and I have a long history with Express because you came in my shop one day. You were on a trip up to La Crosse, and you stopped here and happened to look at the one I had, an X21, and the rest is history. I mean, you fell in love with it that day, and now you've been running it for quite a while. Pretty good boat. I mean, it's a pretty good boat no matter what league you're fishing in, whether it's small or big. They got soup to nuts at Express.
Yeah, like you said, they got something for everyone. And when I think when we talk about aluminum boats, even still today, there's always that misconception that they can't go on the big water, they can't handle it. And Terry, I've had my boat all across the country, pretty much on every Great Lake that's got a smallmouth or a largemouth in it. I've had it in every situation that it can handle, from you know shallow enough where the ducks are walking around to out on the Great Lakes where there's 4 and 5 foot waves. So that whole misconception of an aluminum boat can't do it, I think we've pretty much broke that.
Well, it's funny because everybody also thinks they're heavy or not heavy. They pull real easy, some of that kind of stuff, which we know is a big advantage on gas mileage and everything else. But they don't draft very deep. 11 inches, 12 inches, something like that, and they jump on a plane that's unbelievable. I didn't want this to be an Express boat commercial, but I can tell you they are the real deal. They're a really good boat. Where I live in Central Illinois, there's a lot of them, and I think there's even more because they're affordable. They pull well. They have all the amenities you'd want to have. Fit and finishes real good. So there are a lot of big advantages to an aluminum boat, maybe over a fiberglass at times.
Yeah, I believe so too. And look, in today's day and age where prices are going through the roof, and obviously you could rig one out till you completely ran out of money. But what I'm starting to see a lot of, not only of you know, guys fishing the higher levels, or the kids in high school and college that are starting to run express boats as well, for that same reason. I mean, that you have the ability to do everything you want to do. It may help, parents get into that price point where they need to be, depending on how big of a boat they want. And like I said, you could rig it out till you ran out of money, but to get in a boat that you can fish in, be comfortable in, rigged with, Humminbird electronics, Humminbird Minn Kota trolling motors, and things like that. It can get you on the water without breaking the bank. That's for sure.
Well, you've got, it's funny because Lee Livesey and Caleb Summel, right, are the two other
Yep.
guys with
Hmm.
you. You're a lead dog there. I mean, you were the first real guy that they went out and really hustled. Skylar Hamilton was as well, but you were really the lead dog at getting somebody to, number one, won tournaments. Number two was always at the top of the leaderboard. But you were the guy that was really kind of showing Express, hey, a pro staff is a pretty good deal.
I don't know. I think Clay Connor had a lot to do with that. You and I both know Clay Connor very well. I consider him a good friend of mine. Um, but Clay's always been that guy that has a vision. I mean, his vision was always to um, look way down the road, further than any of us would ever think. You know what I mean? And for him to approach me with the opportunity to get on board with Express, I'll be grateful and thankful to him as long as I live. But the big thing with Express is, Terry, I have a lot of um, relationships in the industry that have been that I've been partnered with for a long time, and I've always looked for that family atmosphere, that family feeling, and that's what you get at Express. I believe they're 50 plus years family owned, just a core family group, and it shows in everything they do. And I'm just blessed to be part of that.
It didn't hurt that you won one out of the gate either.
Yeah,
You want to take
well,
one of the leads.
I've going on, I believe, 8 or 9 years with Express. Been very fortunate to get both of my blue trophies out of that boat. But not only myself. I mean, the pro staff at, well, I hate to say pro staff, the partners that have come through Express. With me and Lee Livesey and Caleb Summerall and Jason Christie. You know what I mean? We've got a tremendous amount of blue trophies. We have a classic win. So once again, it's a boat that can do everything and perform on the highest level or the highest stage.
Serious gear for serious anglers. DD26 delivers tournament tough performance you can trust. From the front to back of your boat, DD26 has you covered. DD26. No shortcuts, just badass American made gear.
We had to talk about that because number one, my affiliation with them has always been superb. You talked about Clay. What this whole business, this whole goofy business that you and I are involved in, is about relationship. And if you don't have that, it becomes a battle at times. When you don't have to worry about the relationship part and the trust is there, I don't care if it's Strike King, I don't care if it's Berkeley, I don't care who it is, but if you've got that, it's huge. And when you start thinking about it, that's kind of the what you built your foundation on with Express was this foundation of trust, the fact that they wanted you there, which is really important, and the fact that you're winning with their product. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is, and it means so much to have that relationship because it lets you be in your comfort zone all the time. You know what I mean? You're not forcing something to happen. Not only do I run the X21 on the tour, I spent all winter in my Express duck boat. You know what I mean? Running through the timber, flooded fields, big water, small water. So for me, it's just a natural fit. You know what I mean? To be able to run it on tour and spend the winter chasing waterfowl in it. Like I said, I'll be grateful forever to have the opportunity to be at Express Boats.
Well, it's funny because you went to China, you weren't back a half a day. I think you spent a day with your wife, and then you went duck hunting. Took your son duck hunting, and you're the whirling dervish, is what I believe is. You're never sitting still. Always got something going on, and being a hunter adds to that mix, no doubt about it, right?
Yeah, so we always joke that we fish all summer so we can hunt all winter. Obviously, I have a lot of partners in the hunting side as well. Mossy Oak is one of my big sponsors. Boss Shot Shells is a big partner of mine. So even though I'm going hunting, I'm still in theory working, if that makes sense. 3 days before I got on the plane to go to China, I'm a big bow hunter. I love to bow hunt, especially during the rut. And this year it was going to fall out where I had 3 days to hunt the rut. Which when the rut's on, you can ask Jennifer this. I typically stay in the tree from daylight to dark for that week leading up to gun season because typically I don't like to gun hunt. I don't have anything against gun hunting. I just always enjoyed that close um, feeling you get with being in a tree stand with a bow, right? So I just always grew up doing that, and I've killed a few deer with a slug gun. You know what I mean? Because I never had the opportunity to shoot one with a rifle. So I shot my deer with my bow in Indiana a day or two before I got on the plane to go to China. A nice mainframe 10 pointer. Jumped on the plane, flew to China for 10 days, 10, 11 days, whatever that was. Got off the plane Monday night at like midnight. Jennifer and the kids picked me up. Hung out with her on Tuesday. Fisher and I jumped in the truck on Wednesday and headed to Arkansas. The opener of waterfowl season in Arkansas was going to be that Saturday, and this was a Wednesday. Basically, I showed up there, grassed in pit blinds, got a house that we ran in order, um, dropped Fisher off with my buddies, and I had to jump in the truck and drive to Oklahoma. Um, I drove to Oklahoma to meet the guys at Mossy Oak, and we went to an outfitter in Oklahoma um, called Canadian River Hilton Outfitters, and had the opportunity to shoot my first deer with a rifle. We just talked about I'd never killed a deer with a rifle, and got to go there and shoot a really nice heavy horned 8 pointer in Oklahoma. Um, got that done, got all the footage wrapped up, all the filming. Like I said, I was with the guys from Mossy Oak. Jumped back in the truck that Sunday afternoon, drove to Arkansas, 8 hour drive to meet up with my buddies and Fisher, my son, hunt for 2 days, and then rush home to make Thanksgiving. So the last month for me has been crazy, but that's how the whole year's been. I fished the elites this year and the NPFL. We left home in February, and we were only home about 10 days for the whole season. So the whole year for me has been crazy. And once again, we're going to fish the elites this year and the NPFL as well. Um, Qualified for the Classic, qualified for the NPFL Championship. So this year again is going to be crazy. I don't even know if we'll have an opportunity to be home or not. I feel like when I get home, all I do is cut grass and check the mail.
Yeah, I talked to Paul Elias one time. I said, "Who cuts your grass?" He said, "I use Roundup." And so it's one of those deals. I want to go back to the Elite Series. I want to go back to the NPFL. You're always looking, and I think most pro anglers that are really diehard like you, they're wanting to have more events. And I think the NPFL has filled that niche. I mean, the Elite Series is still the Elite Series. It'll always be the Classic. Will always be the Classic. There'll never be anything like it. But you always want to fish more events. The NPFL gave you that opportunity, and you did really well on it.
Yeah, it's always a big decision on what you're going to do, what you're going to fish. My heart and soul has always been the Bassmasters, making the Classic. You know that we've talked about that a million times. There's no other feeling than standing on that Classic stage in front of thousands of people. I wish every bass angler could experience that at least one time in their life. Um, and then the MPFL come along, and like you said, to all of us as anglers, we want to just fish more events. You know what I mean? We want opportunities to showcase our partnerships with companies, just give us more opportunities to make money and just keep us on the water. I mean, that's what we do. When I'm not on the water, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And the MPFL give me that option as well. And so when I look at it, it gives me an opportunity to showcase my skills as an angler on two different platforms. The Bassmaster Elite Series, with the opportunity to use forward-facing sonar, and the MPFL where they ban forward-facing sonar. So you have two different situations there, two different styles. You can showcase both of your abilities, and just sometimes to be able to just go fish in your comfort zone and not have to worry about electronics is kind of cool. So yeah, for me to have the opportunity to fish both tours this year has been a blessing for sure.
Well, it's funny because I've always known you as a guy that fishes the dirt. You're a shallow water guy, grinder. Where you live and where I live, we name the fish. Charlie lives by that bush, Harry lives over there, Betty lives over there. So you have to be a grinder to a certain extent. When you fish the MPFL, that's right in your wheelhouse. It would seem to me. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. That's how I grew up fishing, grinding, fishing on instincts. And Terry, over the last, I'm going to just go ahead and say the last 4 or 5 years. If you look at my career as a whole with the Elite Series, those 4 or 5 years have been really, really rocky for me. Because I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I got lost basically. And what I mean by that is I got lost on fighting my style of fishing and how I grew up and how I made a name for myself on the elites to now we have a piece of technology that I have to learn. I don't have a choice, right? And I got hung up on that. I got hung up on feeling like every time I need to put the boat in the water, I needed to learn that. And God, we spent tremendous amount of time doing that. You know, and Fisher, my son's usually in the boat with me. He's 13. He's really good at forward facing sonar. Um, but I just, as an angler, I got lost. I got lost on what I needed to be doing because I just feel like you can't do both. You either got to do one or the other. And I know some guys are managing it where they can go out and scope for half the day and go fish power fish or shallow fish the rest of the day. But I just couldn't do that and feel comfortable about it. I could not get in a comfort zone. And, you know, I was always been known for being very consistent, cashing checks, making classics. And like I said, the last 3 or 4 years, I just got lost. And last year was the big eye opener for me was that I had the worst finish of my career. I think I finished 85th in the points. That was the very first time that I'd ever been below the cut line. Um, you know, I've been fishing the elites long enough where for every 5 years you're there, you get a drop year. So I had to use one of my drop years, which thank God I have those. Um, but I finished the worst I'd ever finished in points. And going into this year, I told Jennifer, I said, I'm not going to do this again. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, I am not going to fight the, do I use, do I use forward facing sonar? Do I fish my style and what I'm known for? I said, I'm not going to fight it this year. I said, I'm going to fish the way I've always fished. I'm going to go back to trying to cash a check because after I won that first blue trophy at Pickwick, all I wanted to do after that was win, right? And I kind of quit chasing a check. So I told her, I said, I'm going to go back to what I've always done. We're going to chase a check. If we have an opportunity to win, then so be it. But we're going to cash checks and we're going to make classics. And if we get in a situation or a lake where you know that forward facing sonar is going to be the deal, then that's what we'll do. And then on top of that, we fished the MPFL as well, which was no forward facing sonar. So all year long this past season, I just fished in my comfort zone. And I always say when you can fish in your comfort zone, you're going to fish the best of your abilities.
Yep.
And that's how I went into the year. And fortunately, the very first event of the year on the St. Johns River, I got another blue trophy, fishing the way I love to fish, flipping rod, swim jig rod, and just went and had fun and just kind of got my, if you just want to say, I got my confidence back. You know what I mean? Instead of being sad and down, now I was smiling and happy, you know, and I just carried that throughout the year, everywhere we went. Um, had a great season on both tours. I believe I finished 12th in the Elite Series in points. Finished, I believe, right around 12th in the MPFL as well. Qualified for the Bassmaster Classic. I believe that'll be my 12th Bassmaster Classic. And it's funny, you know, we keep talking about all these old guys and things like that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that I'm going to be the oldest guy in the Bassmaster Classic this year. Um, so that's funny to think that I'm 50, but I'm going to be the old guy, you
Well,
know?
that happens quick. I mean, I can
Yeah,
remember when Skeet and Gerald, all those guys were the young guns. Ike and Ellie, all those guys. It happens quick. I
it,
told them
it
one time I was at a classic and I said, remember Denny Browers? Remember all these guys that helped influence your career because you're going to be there one day. You know,
yeah,
Skeet's retired now. So you start thinking about it. I want to mention Denny again for another reason. Denny, one of the things he's done a great job of, besides being a great angler and all that kind of stuff, is he's mentored a lot of people. And I know you're one of them. You guys are close friends. But he had the ability, uncanny ability to be able to tell you how to win. And once you do that, I remember when you caught that giant, no, I think it was 7 pounder plus or whatever. And I know that had an influence with Denny as well as you and talking with him and talking with him, I talk to him pretty regular, and you were able to figure out how to win, and then you wanted to do that more often because it's pretty special. And I think Denny has a big input in that. And maybe talk a little bit about that if you would.
yeah. You know, he did have a big input in that, and that a lot of people don't know this. Before he retired, him and I were kind of, we call it practice partners. You know what I mean? Where at an event we'll bounce ideas off of each other and things like that. But him and I's style was so much alike, that it was scary. You know what I mean? If I told him something or he told me something, you could just go somewhere sight unseen, never been there before, knowing that you were going to get a bite, right? But what Denny did for me was that he um, opened my eyes up. And what I mean by that is, I grew up on the Ohio River, shallow water, power fisherman. I always say finesse power, right? What I mean by that is a flipping rod, 20-pound line, but I'm flipping an eighth ounce or a quarter ounce jig. You know what I mean? Something small, something finessey, just to try to generate a bite, right?
Mhm.
Well, for years on the Elite Series, I carried that same mentality. I'm going to get a lot of bites, I'm going to cash a lot of checks, but to really have an opportunity to win may not happen. You know what I mean? Because here I am chasing smaller size fish. If you want to go there, and Denny told me one time, he said, "Bill, you catch a tremendous amount of fish, you cash a lot of checks, but if you would just incorporate bigger baits into your arsenal, you probably have a chance to win." And heck, man, back in the day, I'd never dream about throwing a 3/8 or a half-ounce jig. You know what I mean? Maybe throwing a full-size spinnerbait or a big giant square bill. I just would never do that.
Right.
And now over, I don't know, the last 10 years, whatever that is, um, now I don't ever tie any of that quarter-ounce stuff on anymore. You know what I mean? Um, I'm 3/8, half-ounce, 5/8 on a jig. You know what I mean? Just I don't know, just and he was right. And you know how it is. Most bass fishermen are hard headed, so took me a while to learn that. But if there was ever anything that um, he taught me, was definitely that. You know what I mean? Yeah, every one of us got our style. We catch a lot of fish, we get a lot of bites, but um, just making one little tweak in my arsenal give me the ability to catch that better than average size fish. And I think that was we see that when you're flipping a jig or throwing a swim jig. You get a lot of bites still, but you get better than average quality, and that's what it takes to win.
Well, it's funny. I'm writing a little article here now about when do you make your last cast, and it's that. Think about that. I mean, you got to think about that because there's going to come a time when Terry Brown makes his last cast, and it may be because of bad knees, it may be because your hands don't work anymore, but it's going to happen. All of us are going to have a position in our lives where we're not going to be as diehard about bass fishing as we are today. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't see that in the horizon for me, but it's going to happen. And it's funny when Denny quit, he didn't really want to quit. Had knees, backs, all the stuff that goes along with it, and he didn't quit. He's fishing probably as much now as he did when he was fishing the tour. He just doesn't have to travel. So that day will come for all of us, and it's kind of eerie a little bit. Thinking about, man, I'm not going to go. Maybe I won't load the boat up and go fishing anymore. You know, but fishing is something that becomes part of your lifestyle. For me, it's my job, but it's also my lifestyle. If I wasn't working doing what I do, I'd be doing something in the fishing business. I'm sure you're the same way, or hunting. In your case, hunting, and we're going to keep active in it as long as we possibly can. I love that Denny kept fishing. He had knee replacements, he had back issues, he had all this other kind of stuff. He's rebounded, and now is fishing as probably as well as he's ever fished. He'd probably tell you there at Amistad, he knows every square inch of that place. And I think that we all have to look at it differently, maybe than we do. When you talk to youth, whenever I talk to them, I always say, remember, you're going to get old. Today you can jump off of, you're bulletproof. There's going to come a day when you're not. And so you got to take care of your body. You got to take care of your mind. Can't do stupid things. And I'm sure you would attest to that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Before I started fishing full time, I installed flooring. Right, installed flooring full time. That way, we were basically subcontractors. I didn't have a boss telling me I couldn't go to an event. You know what I mean? So I would hustle when I was at home, make money to pay entry fees, and go fish tournaments. You know what I mean? And for you to say like, "Hey, one day we're going to get old," Joe Thomas told me years ago. Um, like my first year on the elites, he's like, "Hey, look, enjoy it because 10 years is going to go by before you in a blink of an eye." And I was like,
Right.
he don't know what he's talking about, but he was right. This was my 20th year full time on the elites, and it honestly feels like it just like I just started yesterday. Um, but you're right, it's going to happen. And I get asked all the time, "Hey, what you going to do after you're done fishing?" And I'm like, "Go fishing." You know what I mean? Go.
I know.
I mean, yeah, it'd be nice if you didn't have to worry about doing anything but going fishing or hunting after you retire. But you know, um, I just look at like Rick Clunn fished till he's 74 years old or however old that was. And
Freaking gaffed him.
like you said, it turns into your lifestyle. Not only me, but Jennifer and the kids and nieces, nephews. I mean, everybody just loves the outdoors, loves to fish. Um, so I don't know what else we would do. I mean, like I
Well,
said,
you
it's
brought up
become
Clun.
our lifestyle.
You brought up Clun. He's fishing the NPFLs. He's on the roster to fish the NPFLs.
Yes.
I
Yep.
knew he couldn't stand it. I knew it. I knew that he couldn't stand it. Now, he didn't want to maybe do a full Elite Series tour or whatever, but he's going to get a fish a little bit more. I don't know what it'd be like not to have Rick Clun around. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly,
it'd be kind of odd, and like when I started 20 years ago, you mentioned some of the names. Everybody was there: Shaw Grigsby, Skeet Reese, Denny Brower, Paul Elias, and most of them guys are either retiring, talking about retiring, have already retired, um, and it it makes me feel like the old guy, especially when all the young guns that are coming up are 18, 19, 20 years old. You know what I mean?
yeah.
You can't even go have a beer with them if you wanted to, you know? Um, but it definitely makes you feel like the old guy. And like I said, I'll be 51 here tomorrow, actually. And I believe, like I said, I'm going to be the oldest guy in the Bassmaster Classic, which that really makes me feel old,
Well, it's funny. You're really only as old as you think you are. I
right?
mean, I'm going to be 70. Try that one out. I'm going to be 70 in January, and I don't feel a bit different than I did when I was 20. Now, my body does.
Right?
My knees, my back, my hips, all the stuff that hurt all the time. If I had $1 for every non OEM part that I have now, I'd be rich. So, you go and you think, God, I got to get this fixed, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. That never entered the mix for me. Now, with that said, my mind still thinks I'm 20. And I think you're going to figure out at 51, you're going to figure out exactly what it takes to do what you do and be successful at it. You're not going to be doing crazy stuff. You're not going to do any of that stuff because you don't have to. You win without doing it. So, it's funny. I always talk about Biffle all the time. He's been a friend of mine for ever since I ever started fishing. And his neck bothers him, his back bothers him. He's still out there doing it and all that kind of stuff. And what I always told him is how many of those boat rides in a 17-foot boat going as hard as you could possibly go would you take back if you could? He wouldn't take any of them back.
No, not at
No,
all.
he'd go right out there. He does it right now, even with a bad neck and back and everything else he's got, because he's a competitor. That's
Right.
what you are, Billy. You're a competitor. It's fun to watch how this thing is maturing. I want to go to the Elite Series a little bit and kind of talk about the off limits a little bit. I think that's something that everybody's kind of talking about, is that they're going to have a 28-day off limits and some of that. I've always believed that integrity is the most important thing we have in bass fishing, especially at the pro level. And there's people that will bend it. There are people that will try to bend the rules and stuff. And I've always hated the no information rule. I've always hated it because I never thought it could be managed. Not that it's a bad rule, it's just hard to manage it. And then you start into the DQs and you got information from this guy because you walk through a donut shop, all that kind of stuff. I think that 28-day off limits will really be huge. I really do. And that way, at least you're not on the water and you're not, soliciting information that way. But it's always been that way. It's always been that way. So I'm thinking that with this move that they just made with that, if they continue to say they're going to do it, that'll be a good thing for you guys in the Elite Series. No doubt about it. And I like it.
Yeah, the current way it's been is that as soon as they announce our schedule, we go off limits totally, right?
Mhm.
And it makes it so hard. Obviously, it makes it damn near impossible to police that. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree.
Um, and if you stop and look at the big picture, the guys that are playing by the rules are the guys that are uh, hurting ourselves, right? Because look, let's face it. You said it. There's going to be guys that bend the rules, and there's guys that play the rules the way they're supposed to be played, and that's the guy that's suffering from the whole deal, right? We fished a 28-day off limits for years and years and years and years and years, and I truly believe we didn't have all the um, craziness going on that we have now. You know what I
Yep.
mean, with disqualifications and things like that. I mean, to be off limits for the announce of the schedule, I mean, 6, 7, 8, 9 months, you could get in a pickle so easily. Obviously, we've seen that arise from, if you're at boat shows or just talking to somebody at a gas station. Look, fishermen love to talk fishing. Hunters love to talk about hunting. Everybody wants to show you the 10-pound bass they caught or the 150-inch whitetail they shot. You know what I mean? That's just the way outdoorsmen are. They want to brag. They want to beat on their chest. I mean, I'm not saying that to hurt anybody's feelings. That's just the way guys in general or outdoors people are. I mean, hell, if I catch a 10-pounder, I'm proud of it. If I shoot a 150-inch whitetail, I'm proud. If I shoot a limit of greenhead mallards, I mean, I want to talk about it. Um, so it's so easy to get in a situation where you maybe are talking about something you shouldn't be. But the worst part of that is having to tell a fan or something that, hey, I can't talk to you. You know what I mean?
That's
Right
that
out of the
double-edged
gate,
sword.
they just think, oh, Bill Lowen's a jerk. He just told me that he can't talk to me. You know what I mean? Um, so I guess I'm a fan of the 28-day off limits for the fact that you can basically live your life. You know what I mean? You don't feel like you're walking on eggshells. And I've always been that guy that definitely plays by the rule, but I've always been that guy when it comes to information. Um, I didn't want your waypoint. I didn't want the one stump out on the mud flat. I didn't want any kind of that information. All I wanted ever was like general information of, hey, if we're going to Kentucky Lake, Jonathan Creek's a really good creek to be in historically. You know what I mean? And
Mhm,
then I'll go in Jonathan Creek and figure it out on my own. You know what I mean?
mhm.
I learned a long, long, long time ago that it's really hard to catch somebody else's fish.
It is.
And if somebody told me, hey, go over here, blah, 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 I never did any good with that. You know what I mean? So I typically try, like I said, if I was gonna have the opportunity to get help, it would be, just a general overall of, hell, if we're at the St. Lawrence River, you got to go to the lake if you want to win. You know what I mean? Um, and that's the kind of stuff, like I said. Um, but I'm a big fan of the 28-day off limits, just because I've always felt that it's about impossible to police. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. I agree.
And the guys that are doing it right are the guys that are suffering. So
You've got
um,
you've got a catch 22, and I'll kind of finalize our podcast here with this: is that we're our jobs, yours and mine, and everybody that fishes, is to share what we love. It's our passion. I've always been told, don't follow your passion, but take it along with you. And I think it's important that we are able to share our thoughts and processes. You go to a boat show, it's not me at a boat show, it's Bill Lowen, who's a classic qualifier at a boat show. And people want to talk to you. And you, by you saying I can't talk to you, why are we there? Why even go? Why even go to the show? Because that's what we're there for, is the fans. And if we go there for the fans and have our hearts in the right spot, that's where that's going to be a beneficial thing for Bassmaster. I believe that's the greatest call they've made in a long time. Go back to that. Let's just see what happens. The anglers wanted tighter reins on things, but ultimately, I think what we're going to find out is integrity is the number one thing. If you've got integrity, you're not going to bend the rules. You're going to stay there. You're going to try to do the best you can. Those that bend the rules will get caught up with. They always do. And man, I appreciate you being with me. You know, we don't talk enough. We used to talk all the time, and you're on the road all the time, duck hunting, doing all the stuff in China, doing all those kind of things. But I really appreciate it. This has been a tutorial for me just on how busy you guys are. And
Well, like I said, Terry, I'm glad you invited me in, and just to kind of close this out, I'm so glad you brought that up about being able to basically pass our knowledge on, with the fans, with the kids, with the next generation. I've always said that I've always prided myself on being able to help others or teach others or just pass on my knowledge, not only in fishing but waterfowl hunting, deer hunting. Look, there's always somebody that needs help. And I look back as when I was a kid growing up, somebody was always taking time out of their schedule to help me, show me the ways. Had they not done that, my dad was a tournament fisherman as well, but had they not done that, you and I wouldn't be talking today, right?
that's right.
And when I started the elites, my goal was never ever to be like the number one angler in the world. That was never my goal. My goal was always to be the best ambassador for the sport that I could possibly be, and just pass on everything I know. And now with hopefully the 28-day off limits and things like that, we can get back to um, what I truly love, and that's, like I said, being the best ambassador for the sport that we can be.
Well, you've no doubt done that. I appreciate you being with us, and look forward to this year. I look forward to 26. It's going to be a fun time.
Well, we hope so. Like I said, I'm going to fish the way I fish, and it's either going to be really good or really bad.
This has been All Bass No Bull. Billy Lowen, thanks for being with us.